big believer that I'm a big believer that most people in life are bad at most things. I think we're all good at a few things, but we all have one thing about us that makes us special, that makes us different, that makes us unique. And it's our superpower. And the more quickly that you could figure out what it is that makes you different, what it is that makes you special, what it is that makes you unique, the more successful you'll be in business, the more successful you'll be in life, the more successful you'll be as a leader. Now, when I said that most people in life are bad at most things, I am including myself in that category. I personally am bad at most things. One of the things that I'm really bad at is being able to stay awake in presentations where the person speaking to me is not particularly engaging. So my promise to you today is to make sure to keep you awake, although I know we're toward the end of the conference, so that might not necessarily be a good thing, but I'm also going to show you the one thing that I've learned from my conversations with hundreds and hundreds of America's most successful leaders. So to give you a little bit of background, I've gone one-on-one with more than 500 of the most successful leaders in America, Fortune 500 CEOs, founders of household name companies, Hall of Fame athletes, four-star generals, top political leaders. These are some of the companies whose founders and CEOs I've interviewed on my podcast, 30-Minute Mentors. One of the earliest guests on my podcast was this man. Does anyone know who he is? If you do, please say so or put it in the chat. Pause for a second, see if anyone recognizes him. You know, we have a number of people here well-versed in the world of government. Does his face stand out to anyone? Not all at once. I'm going to take that as a no. Well, that is Admiral Jim Stavridis, one of the most prominent, most successful military leaders of our day. Admiral Stavridis, retired four-star admiral, was the Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. And Admiral Stavridis was one of the earliest guests on my podcast, 30-Minute Mentors. And what Admiral Stavridis told me that stood out is when most people think about military leaders, the first thing they think of is this. Probably recognize him. Can anyone tell us who this is? Somebody in the chat. I'm peering over to the side on my other screen to look at the chat to see if anyone recognizes this person. Do we have anybody who can tell me who this is? Or unmute yourself. Someone has to recognize him. Going once, going twice.
An actor.
Which actor?
Oh God, I don't know.
It's Jack Nicholson from A Few Good Men. The Joker, okay. All right. That's right, Jack Nicholson from A Few Good Men. Well, given that you may not be familiar,
I have neither the time nor the inclination to explain myself to a man who rises and sleeps under the blanket of the very freedom that I provide, and then questions the manner in which I provide it. I would rather you just said thank you and went on your way. Otherwise, I suggest you pick up a weapon and stand a post. Either way, I don't give a damn what you think you are entitled to.
Did you order the code red?
I did the job.
Did you order the code red?
You're goddamn right I did!
See Tom Cruise's reaction. So that's Jack Nicholson from A Few Good Men. And Jack Nicholson in the movie plays a Marine Corps officer who leads the way that you saw in that clip by yelling, by screaming, through fear, through intimidation. And as Admiral Stavridis told me, we often think of military leaders as being able to lead effectively by leading through fear, leading through intimidation, leading through yelling, leading through screaming. But through my conversations with America's top military leaders, I came to learn that it's the exact opposite. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you an example. Lori Reynolds, one of the most successful military leaders of our day, one of only 3 women to serve as a 3-star general in the Marine Corps, highest ranking woman in the Marines for almost a decade. Here's a little clip from my interview with General Lori Reynolds.
One time I was visiting a group of Marines that were in a schoolhouse in Georgia, and I had been invited to be the guest at their Marine Corps ball. So we always celebrate the Marine Corps birthday. 10 November is our birthday. And so I visited with the group in the morning, and then we went to the ball in the evening. And in the morning, as I was talking to this group of young Marines, so think 18, 19, 20-year-old Marines who were going through a course there in Fort Gordon. And I talked to them about all kinds of things that were happening in the Marine Corps. But we also had this problem with suicide that was happening and is still happening. And so we talked a little bit about this. And I said, Marines, suicide shouldn't be an option. You need to understand that there are all kinds of other options. There are all kinds of ways that you can be helped. And you just need to let us know, let somebody know that you're hurting. And I got to a point in the conversation, Adam, where I said, look, I don't know if anybody needs to hear this right now, but you are loved. I respect what you're doing with your job and your career. So we love you. I love you. Please, if you're thinking, if you're hurting, ask for help because you matter. And Adam, later that night, I was at the ball. I was talking to some Marines, and I could tell that there was this young Marine who was just waiting. He wanted to talk to me alone. So I walked over to him. I said, happy birthday, Marine. And he said, ma'am, I just wanted to tell you what you said today when you said that you loved us. He said, I wasn't raised in a family where we talk like that to each other. And in fact, he said, no one has ever said that they loved me. And so I really appreciated that. And Adam, it just took me back.
Wow, so you compare and contrast the fictional military leader, Jack Nicholson, leading by yelling and screaming, with the real life military leader, General Laurie Reynolds, leading through compassion, leading through love. In my interviews with hundreds of America's top leaders, I put together a list of the key characteristics of the most successful leaders. And right on that list, love of people. If you want to be a successful leader, you have to fundamentally love people. You can be successful in life without loving people. There are plenty of things you can do without loving people, but you're never going to be successful as a leader unless you truly love people. As you work your way up the list, right at the heart of the list, self-awareness. Before you can effectively lead others, you need to be able to lead your own life. Before others are going to follow you, you need to become a person worth following. Now, I developed self-awareness pretty early on by playing baseball. Not sure how many people here have played baseball, have family members who have played baseball, played other sports. But in my experience, playing baseball teaches you so many things. And one of those things that the game teaches you is self-awareness. And when I was in high school, I developed the awareness that I couldn't hit a baseball. But nonetheless, I was captain of my baseball team, not because I was good at hitting a baseball, I certainly was not, but because of my leadership skills. And that was a pattern that was pretty consistent throughout my life. I grew up on a street called Velos Avenue in Tarzana, California, which is part of Los Angeles, a little bit a ways away from where many of you are in Maryland. And when I was a kid, I was bad at most things. To this day, I still struggle with tying my shoes. I don't know how to cook. We could spend the next hour just going through all the things I'm bad at. One of the things you observed early on, I'm not good with IT issues. You might still see that gray box. I don't know if you can or can't. I have no idea. One of the many, many things in life that I'm bad at. But I was always really good at connecting with people, developing relationships with people, all kinds of people younger than me, people older than me, people my age, no matter what their interests were, no matter what their background was, just came easily to me. It was my gift. It was my superpower. And that allowed me to do things like when I was in school, I was student body president, not because I had any political ambitions, but because I was just friends with everyone. When I was in college, I did my undergrad at USC here in Los Angeles. I graduated at the top of my class. Why? Definitely not the smartest, definitely not the best at studying, but was really good at building relationships. I understood that if you could build relationships with your professors, if they knew your name, if they liked you, they'd give you an A. I was good at building relationships with my academic advisors. They would tell you what professors to take. Built relationships with deans. They help guide you along the way. And what happens when you graduate at the top of your class? It sets you on a certain career trajectory, which in my case led me to New York. I moved to Manhattan, went to work on Wall Street, got a job at the biggest hedge fund in the world, worked there for a couple of years, and then took the next step along my career path. Went to get my MBA at UCLA, another great school, did well there, and then took that next step on my career path and went and worked actually at this building. Not sure, does anyone recognize this building? If you do, feel free to say it or type it into the chat. Give a minute, see if anyone recognizes this building. Went and worked at big Fortune 150 bank, another prestigious company. And this building actually is the Die Hard building, where on Christmas Eve in the movie Die Hard, hostages were taken. And it was at that moment that I came to the realization that I was actually a hostage to my own decision making. Everything that I was doing was in service of what? I was checking all these boxes. I was climbing this ladder, but to what end? Wasn't bringing me any kind of happiness, wasn't bringing me any kind of fulfillment, wasn't bringing me any kind of meaning. I had all these prestigious degrees, prestigious jobs, was making money, but I wasn't happy. Everyone now is talking about the Great Resignation. They weren't talking about it back then, but I came to realize that whatever I was doing wasn't it. It was a real fork in the road moment for me, and was really wrestling with what to do next. And I decided to go back to my roots and started a company with my brother. We called it the Veloz Group, named after the street that we grew up on. And we started 2 different e-commerce businesses and a software development company. And from the outside looking in, great success. Really great success. But on the inside, I knew something was missing. I knew I wasn't reaching that breakthrough success that I was capable of. I knew that I wasn't reaching my potential. I knew that I wasn't reaching that level of fulfillment that I was capable of reaching. And why was that? Because I wasn't using my superpower. My day was spent as an e-commerce entrepreneur doing lots and lots of different things, but very little of it, if at all, was spent doing what I was great at, building relationships with people, connecting with people. Now, what happened was I actually started to do some writing. When you're starting new businesses, one of the things you're focused on is getting as much PR as possible for your companies. And that led me to do some writing. Turns out my writing got picked up in different media outlets, Forbes, Inc., Huffington Post. And I realized I was actually much better at writing than I was at running my different e-commerce businesses. And I just kept leaning into it more and more. I was enjoying it more and more. And that led me to start an interview series where I started interviewing prominent leaders across all kinds of backgrounds. That led me to start 30-Minute Mentors, where for the first time in my career, I was really able to use my superpower in a professional setting. Really allowed me for the first time professionally to align my superpower with what I was doing day in and day out. Now, something I want to emphasize to each of you here today, your skill is not your superpower. Now, I can't see your faces because we're on Zoom and you have your screens off, but imagine there's some confusion. What does that mean? Your skill is not your superpower. Your skill is not your superpower. Well, your skill is what you do. If you're a doctor, what is your skill? Being a doctor. If you're a lawyer, what is your skill? You're a lawyer. Your skill is your vocation. Your superpower is your gift that allows you to excel at what you do. Your skill is temporary. You could change jobs tomorrow. You get a new skill. Your superpower is with you forever. Everyone understands their skill. What's your job? That's your skill. Only the most successful people understand their superpower. Does anyone know who this is?
James Harden.
Very close. Not
Yeah.
James Harden, but close. It's James Worthy. So James Worthy, one of the all-time great basketball players, one of the 50 greatest basketball players in NBA history as named by the NBA, was on the Lakers when they won multiple championships with Showtime, Magic, Kareem. Here's a little clip of James Worthy. Watch his footwork.
McHale one-on-one with 7 on the shot clock. Great move by James Worthy.
Beautiful move, beautiful footwork. Wow. Not sure if we have Laker fans here, but I'm excited about the Laker game tonight. If we have Laker fans, feel free to say so in the chat unless you're too afraid to. But I don't know if we have any Celtics fans here. If we do, I won't judge. James Worthy spent the last 30 years since retiring from basketball. We got a thumbs up. All right, whoever did that, I like you. We're friends now. James Worthy spent the last 30 years since retiring from basketball as a television analyst for the Lakers. And I went one-on-one with James Worthy, figuratively, not literally. I know better. And I asked James Worthy, what is the best lesson that you learned from your time spent around Kobe Bryant? And he shared a story. He told me about the first time he met Kobe. Kobe had just gotten drafted by the Lakers, 18 years old. Kobe grew up in Italy. And Kobe tells James, growing up, I watched hours and hours and hours of you play. And that move, the move that I showed you, I watched that move. I studied that move. Can you teach me that move? I want to learn that move from you. And James Worthy was blown away. Kobe knows me, has studied me. He wants to learn that footwork from me. He was just incredibly impressed that this 18-year-old kid had done this homework and studying and preparation, wanted to learn this footwork. Told me about the first time Kobe Bryant met Michael Jordan. James Worthy was college teammates with Michael Jordan. They both went to University of North Carolina together. And Kobe, Michael Jordan, and James Worthy go out to dinner. And what does Kobe do over the course of the dinner? All he does is ask Michael Jordan questions. All he wants to do is learn, listen and learn. As James Worthy described Kobe to me, Kobe was like a sponge. All he wanted to do was absorb information. Kobe's last year in the league, had played 20 years in the NBA. James Worthy gets a call from Kobe. James, do you have time? Can you meet? Of course, Kobe. Absolutely. He's getting ready to meet Kobe, and he's wondering, what does Kobe want to talk to me about? Getting ready to retire. It's his last year in the league. Maybe he's interested in trying to figure out what to do when he retires. What's life like after basketball? Maybe he's interested in broadcasting, wants to get my advice on working in television. What does Kobe want to talk to James Worthy about? That same move. 20 years later, he's still trying to perfect that same exact move. Kobe Bryant, skill, basketball player. Superpower, being a sponge. Does anyone know who this person is?
Actors.
That's right. Which actor?
I don't know their names.
So I don't know if we probably don't have too many fans of The Office on this call, but maybe you have family members who like The Office, one of the all-time great television shows. On my right, we have Brian Baumgartner, who plays Kevin Malone, one of the stars of The Office. And not sure if we have any accountants on this call, but if we do, I hope you're better at accounting than Kevin Malone. Brian won an Emmy for his role playing Kevin Malone, and that's his best known role. But what people might not know about Brian is that he also starred in a couple of different movies with this man, Robin Williams. And I asked him, what was the best lesson you learned from your time spent with Robin Williams? And he told me that when you're on a movie, there's a lot at stake. There's a lot on the line. There's a lot of pressure, a lot of money involved. You can make or break your career based on the performance of one film. Everyone understands that. But Robin Williams understood that as the biggest name on set, as the most important person on set, as the leader on set, his job was to make sure that every single person came in every single day and felt good. And he was committed to that. He was committed to making sure that he did everything he could to make sure everyone felt good. I don't know if you've heard the story about Steven Spielberg when he was making Schindler's List, but once a week, Robin Williams would call him for 15 minutes and do a private 15-minute stand-up comedy session, just one-on-one. Robin Williams, Steven Spielberg, because he understood that that was what Steven Spielberg needed at that moment in his life to get through that grueling period. Robin Williams, skill, comedian, superpower, ability to make people feel good. A few other examples from people who I've interviewed. Laurent Therivel, the CEO of AT&T, the CEO of US Cellular, formerly the CEO of AT&T Mexico. Skill, leading multi-billion-dollar wireless communication companies. Superpower, as he described it to me, his ability to take highly complex problems, simplify them, and clearly communicate them. Rebecca Minkoff. I don't know if we have anyone here who wears Rebecca Minkoff, one of the most successful fashion designers in America. Skill, fashion designer. Superpower, one of the most resourceful people you will ever come across. Resourcefulness. Gary Friedman, CEO of RH, multi-billion-dollar furniture company. Skill, leading a multi-billion-dollar business. Superpower, as he described it to me, his ability to visually organize. Last and certainly not least, Layla Ali, one of the greatest female boxers of all time, undefeated. Her dad, Muhammad Ali, one of the greatest boxers of all time, if not the greatest of all time. When Layla Ali wanted to become a boxer, she went to her dad and said, "Dad, I want to become a boxer." What did he say? "No, women don't box. You're not going to do it." And what did she do? She did it anyway. She didn't care. We're talking about a level of iron-headed determination that's second to none. And that determination has fueled her success inside the ring, outside the ring, as a boxer, as an entrepreneur, doing so many things in life. And it's an important point because if you go back to the example of Kobe, his superpower, being a sponge, fueled him to be a great basketball player, Hall of Fame basketball player, one of the greatest basketball players of all time, but also allowed him to win an Academy Award, become a great investor. He was actually given the opportunity to run the Lakers front office. He was a New York Times bestselling author. General David Petraeus, one of the great military leaders of our day, the man behind the surge in Iraq and Afghanistan. I did an interview with General David Petraeus, And I tell you a little bit more about his background. He became the director of the CIA, and today he's a leading venture capitalist. He's also a partner at KKR, one of the biggest private equity firms in America. When I did an interview with General David Petraeus, what was clear to me was that he was still upset about finishing second in the chili cook-off. He was still upset about not winning the softball tournament 25 years ago. You're talking about a level of competitiveness that has fueled his success in everything he's done through all these endeavors. Another example, Tony Romo. Look at his eyes, if you can, if my gray box isn't blocking it. Talking about a superpower of vision. As a quarterback, Tony Romo made $108 million playing football for the Dallas Cowboys. Not bad. I think we would all be happy with that. I'd be happy with that. When he retired, he signed a contract with CBS to be an analyst. $180 million. So what's the takeaway here? We all have weaknesses. The most successful people understand that they have weaknesses, but they lean into their strength. They recognize that to make it to the very top, you need to focus on your strength. You need to discover, develop, and deploy your superpower. That's the road to success. So how do you discover your superpower? I've asked this question to many of America's top leaders. One of the leaders I asked this question to, Bill George, the CEO of Medtronic, was a billion-dollar company when he took over, was a $40 billion company when he left. He said, it's easy. You just have to look inward and look outward. Sounds easy, but how do you do that? Looking inward. I did an interview with Jay Johnson, the then Secretary of Homeland Security, talking about as high pressure a job as you could have. The man in charge of the department responsible for protecting the United States of America. And I asked him, how do you get to a place where you can remove the pressure, this enormous pressure of your job, and do your best thinking? He said, it's easy. I just put on my headsets and listen to jazz music. I did an interview recently, it hasn't been released yet, with Ja Rule, one of the most successful rappers of all time. And I asked him, how do you get to a place where you are able to unlock your creativity? He said, I go to my think tank. What's his think tank? It's his jacuzzi. For me, it could be going to a baseball game. For you, it could be going on a walk. It could be meditating. It could be doing yoga. It could be traveling. It could be taking a shower. It could be talking to a friend, a loved one. Whatever it is, get to that place and start asking yourself these questions. What do I love doing and why? What comes easily to me and why? What can I do all day, every day, without getting bored? And why? What energizes me? What fuels me? What fires me up? What gets me going? And why? What about that does it for me? And then start to look outward. What do others appreciate in me? What do others tell me makes me special, makes me different, makes me unique? One of the things that Bill George told me, said feedback is the breakfast of champions. And I said, I thought Wheaties was the breakfast of champions. But if you look really closely at this Wheaties box, right in the middle, you'll see David Robinson, an NBA champion, actually a two-time NBA champion. who I had on 30-minute mentors. And David Robinson would not have become a champion had he have not listened to the feedback of the great coaches he had around him, including Greg Popovich, one of the all-time great coaches. Right next to David Robinson is Tim Duncan, one of the greatest basketball players of all time, who was mentored by David Robinson. He became great because he was open to feedback. Go out and get feedback. Listen to it. How do you develop your superpower? Not going to surprise you when I say this, but I'm a big believer in the power of mentorship. I did an interview with Marshall Goldsmith, the #1 business coach in America. And something that Marshall shared, which stood out to me. And he said as follows. And I'm gonna share this with everyone here as well. Anyone listening to our conversation right now, if you want a mentor, think about who you want to be your mentor. Who is the one person out of everyone in the world who you want to be your mentor? Write that person's name down. Find that person. Find them however you can. Send them an email, write them a letter. And in that letter, in that email, tell them, I was listening to Adam's podcast, or in this case, I was listening to a keynote. You can say my name, you don't need to say my name. And I was challenged to name the one person in the world who I would want to be my mentor. And that person is you. How would you react if you received that letter? How would you react if someone sent you that letter? I have a number of other tips around mentorship, which I'm going to share with you a little bit later on. But equally as important as finding a mentor, if not more important, is something that I call mini mentors. So a traditional mentor, as you know, is someone who you could meet with whenever you want, once a week, once a month, go for coffee, go for lunch, call them up. What's a mini mentor? Mini mentor is someone who you might only talk to once. Maybe you talk to them once a year. Maybe you talk to them once every 10 years. But that one interaction can completely change your perspective, can completely change the trajectory of your life, can completely change the trajectory of your career. We need more than one person to help us take that next step in our journey. Commit yourself to lifelong learning. Through my interviews with hundreds of America's top leaders, one of my biggest takeaways, the most successful leaders have a growth mindset. Recognize that learning never ends. Have a mindset that prioritizes getting better. Are dedicated to figuring out, what can I do to gain that edge by learning more information? Now, I like this picture a lot because I could never learn this way. I could never learn by picking up a thick stack of textbooks. Maybe you can. What is your best way of learning? Is it by reading textbooks? Is it by listening to podcasts? Is it by watching YouTube videos? My best way of learning is by finding people who I know, who know a ton about a certain area, and talking to them and learning from them. However you learn best, lean into it, commit to it, dedicate yourself to it. Push your comfort zone. Sounds cliche, we hear that all the time. How do you push your comfort zone? I asked that question to the CEO of Orange Theory Fitness, a guy by the name of Dave Long. His entire business is built around people being able and being willing and wanting to push their comfort zones. When you think about pushing your comfort zone, you always think about, I'm going to go all in. I'm going to take on this new project, this new challenge. I'm going to accomplish this new goal. I'm going to dive into the deep end. But the reality is, when you learn how to swim, you start in the shallow end. You start one step at a time. How do you become an Orange Theory member? You start by taking a walk. Walk 20 minutes a day. That 20 minutes will turn into 30 minutes. Will turn into 40 minutes. Will turn into an hour. You'll start jogging. You'll start running. And then you'll start taking Orange Theory. And then you'll like it. And you'll become a member. How do you deploy your superpower? I did an interview with a man by the name of George Stevens Jr. George Stevens Jr. is a 15-time Emmy Award winner, won an Academy Award for Lifetime Achievement, is the founder of the American Film Institute, is the co-founder of the Kennedy Center Honors. And George Stevens shared a story with me about a friend of his by the name of Yo-Yo Ma. He got to know Yo-Yo Ma, the world's greatest cellist. As George and Yo-Yo were doing work together in bringing the arts into inner city schools in Washington, D.C. The idea was you have underperforming schools in Washington, D.C. If we can teach kids the arts, music, television, film, they're going to perform better. That was the idea. And George Stevens goes into this school with Yo-Yo one day, and he watches what transpires. And as George describes it to me, he's mesmerized. Everyone is mesmerized. The kids are mesmerized. The kids are enthralled, enraptured, I believe was the word he used, with Yo-Yo. Blown away by him. And afterwards, he's chatting with Yo-Yo, and Yo-Yo Ma tells him, again, the number one cellist in the world, tells him, every time I give a performance, doesn't matter where I'm giving it. Could be in an inner city school in Washington, D.C. It could be in Carnegie Hall. That is the single most important performance I am going to be giving that year. That has to be your mindset. That has to be all of our mindsets. That has to be how we approach every single day. That has to be how we deploy our superpower. That has to be how we define ourselves. We have to check these three boxes. Number one, am I doing something that I love? Number two, am I doing something that I'm great at? Number three, am I making a positive impact? If you can check all three of those boxes, you know you found it. It doesn't feel like work. You could wake up first thing in the morning and you can keep going until you have no energy left. And the next day you're going to be fired up to do it again. I don't know about you, but I've had jobs in my career where at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I was completely drained. Drained from doing what? Not from working too hard, but from not checking these three boxes. From not having the alignment. If your skill is over here and your superpower is over here, you're not going to be checking those three boxes. Ultimately, you need your skill and your superpower to intersect. That's what it's all about. Now, I made mention to a mentor guide that I want to share with you. I also made mention about the importance of feedback. So we have about 15 minutes left. So what I'm going to do right now is take a quick pause for about 2 minutes. And I'm going to ask everyone on today's session, and if anyone's going to listen to this on a subsequent recording, to do the same thing. If you could scan this QR code or go to talk.ac/Adam. If you could do that right now and punch in the code on the screen when prompted, mentor. If you do that, you're going to have a few quick questions that will allow me to get feedback on today's talk. Please be as descriptive as possible. It helps me. That's my one ask of everyone today. What you'll get is my guide, my best tips on the topic of mentorship, how to find a great mentor. So we're going to take a quick 2-minute break to give everyone the opportunity to do this. We're going to then reconvene. I'm going to close with one last thought. And then in our remaining time, we're going to take questions if there are any. And I'm going to ask you, after you filled it out, if in the chat you could just type in done, so I can know that you're done and that we can then move on and I can close out with my one last point.
And if you don't have the chat option, you can just raise your hand or just let me know in the Q&A as well.
The code is mentor.
You beat me to it.
Oh.
Did you see my chat comment?
Yes.
Let me know when you've accomplished that, and we can hear the last point on the success. A great opportunity for you to scan this QR code and complete the quick survey and then get the little bonus at the end. So if you haven't had a chance to do it, or if you had to step away for some reason, go ahead and scan the QR code and type in that code that says mentor to get a little bonus. I'm excited about that.
We'll give it one more minute and then close with one last point, and then we'll go to Q&A.
Yeah.
What were the dates?
I did an interview with a guy by the name of Evan Goldberg. Evan is the founder of a company called NetSuite. Not sure if any of you have used his product, but he sold his company for $9.3 billion. I asked Evan, what is your single best piece of advice for any entrepreneur? And he told me, just get started. If you get started, you're 50% there. I did an interview with a guy by the name of Mike Evans. Mike is the founder of a company called Grubhub. Not sure how many of you have used Grubhub. Mike started the company. And I asked Mike, what can anyone do to become more successful personally and professionally? And Mike told me, just get started. If you get started, you're 51% there. So we could argue, is it 50%? Is it 51%? But as we know too well, the perfect can be the enemy of the good. And when you're taking on anything of consequence, it's very easy to get bogged down trying to chase perfection. And there's nothing more important than this: the journey to discover, develop, and deploy your superpower, the journey to become your best self, the journey to most effectively lead your own life and lead others. So my challenge to every single person here today, and those of you who are not here today but are ultimately watching this via recording, I want to ask you to identify one thing. What is one thing that you can do? What is one thing that you can take on, regardless of where you are in your journey, to discover, develop, or deploy your superpower? And I'm going to issue a second challenge. For those of you on this call who are leaders, which I would imagine is everyone, we're all leaders. What is one thing you can do to help the people you're leading discover, develop, and deploy their superpower? And with that, in our remaining time, I'm happy to answer any questions. If we go past our remaining time, I'm happy to stick around. So any questions, please.
I have three.
Please.
First of all, thank you. Great job. You're so
Thank you.
engaging and so nice. And this was really fun. So I appreciate it. And Amy, great introing. My first question is, where have you interviewed these people?
Can you,
sorry?
do you mind introducing yourself and just myself and for the other
This is
participants?
recorded, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to say what
Okay.
agency I'm with.
No problem. Okay.
Because of one question in particular.
Okay. No problem.
Thank you. Can you where have you interviewed these great people?
Where?
Yeah. Is it an organization or?
So I have a podcast called 30-Minute Mentors, where each week I release an episode with one of America's top leaders. So every person who I've made reference to in today's talk is someone who I interviewed on my podcast, 30-Minute Mentors.
Very cool. Thank you.
Thank
I'm
you.
gonna tune into your podcast. My second question is, how do you get back on track after you're knocked down daily by your supervisor?
Wow, great question.
That's why I didn't want to say like
Yeah,
exactly
yeah,
who I was. Oh,
yeah. Great question. I love that question. So I am I'm currently talking to a friend of mine who is in the process of discovering that she's being cheated on by her boyfriend. My message to her is, do not allow the actions of your boyfriend to at all define the way that you feel about yourself. Because one person is a bad actor, and because one person does bad things, it should have no bearing toward the way that you value yourself, value your worth. It says everything about them, it says nothing about you. So I want to deliver that same message to you. When you have a supervisor who's treating you poorly, that says everything about them. It says nothing about you. The number one reason why people leave their jobs is because they don't like their bosses. So I understand that at a certain point, it can become so toxic and so untenable that you just can't take it anymore. I get that. And we can talk through some strategies on how to manage it. But my overarching underlying message is, I think it's really important for you to understand that this has no connection to you as a human being. This has no connection to you as an employee. And if you can separate the two, if you can get to a place where you can come to the acceptance that I'm just working for a rotten apple and that has no bearing on me, it will allow you to have a healthier, clearer, cleaner mindset. Now, that's sort of the higher level approach I would take. Beyond that, what are tactical things you could do? You can talk to other people within the organization who you trust, because again, this is sort of that's a macro level strategy. A micro level strategy is going to other people within the organization who you trust, and trying to ask them, how do I navigate the situation? Because within every organization, it's different. I can tell you, in a company that I worked for, I once had a highly, highly toxic manager, really, really bad manager. And one of my colleagues went to someone one level above her and said, my colleague also worked for this manager. And my colleague went to someone one level above her and said, this person is a toxic manager, and if you want to keep me in this organization, you have to give me a different manager, because I will not stay in this organization as long as I'm working for this manager. And they gave her a different manager. So, I mean, there's no one size fits all answer, because a lot of it depends on the organization and the manager and you. And so I don't want to give you sort of this universal thing to do beyond the first thing I said. But within each organization, there is a different approach to take. And a lot of it comes to turning to the people you trust and trying to help them, have them help you figure out how to best navigate this.
thanks. I really appreciate it, especially the first part of what you said. I was writing down notes, and that's really super helpful. I so appreciate it. I seem to be sucked into work, and then I forget about everything else. So I also need to put myself first, not work all the time.
Yeah. Look, if someone is behaving badly toward you,
Yep.
that says everything about them. It says nothing about you. So
Thank you so much.
yeah, just remember that in the moment.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for the question.
Great questions and great advice as well. What other questions do you have? I know we're at the top of the hour, so if you have another question, just let us know. I don't see any other questions, but I just want to remind everyone, a couple of the key things that Adam asked us to do during this session is to identify that one mentor, that person that you want to mentor you. Did you write their name down? Do you have their name? Are you going to write out to them and say, look, this is out of everyone in the world, I want you to mentor me. So that was one thing. And then also one thing that you can do every day to develop your superpower, and one thing that you can help your people that you might be leading. It doesn't mean that you're a manager, but you might be leading people. What is one thing that you can do to help them achieve that superpower? And thank you so much for your session today. I really enjoyed it and learned a lot. Any last words from you?
If anyone wants to connect, if anyone wants to be in touch, please don't hesitate to reach out. I love doing this. This is one of the ways that I check my 3 boxes. I have found a number of different ways. I do it through teaching, I do it through speaking, I do it through my podcast, and I just love what I do. I love this. To me, it's all about doing what you love, doing something that you're great at, doing something that allows you to make a positive impact in the lives of others. Just to reiterate, you check all 3 of those boxes. That's it. So I hope everyone can get to that place if you're not already there. That's what it's all about.
Do you have any more seminars coming up? Virtual seminars?
I'm actually giving one
With
tomorrow.
TOC?
I'm actually giving one tomorrow for another organization.
Oh, bummer.
And I'm doing one in person. I'm based in Los Angeles. I'm giving a keynote in person in LA on Thursday.
LA is my
One
favorite
next week
place.
in
That's the
Florida.
place I want to live in.
But
Hope to meet you one day.
I would love to collaborate. I know you
I'll
don't.
send you an email.
Yeah, I know you don't want to say what department you work in, but bring me into your department, and I would
Okay.
love to speak to your department. I would love to
Deal.
work together. I travel all the time. I'm going to be in Florida next week. I'm going to be in San Diego 2 weeks after that. I have 2 trips coming up in the Virginia area this summer. So I'm always happy to jump on a plane wherever there's an opportunity to make an impact.
Thank you.
And I'll tell you one other thing that Adam likes to do to fill his bucket: go to baseball games. So I understand he's been known to catch a couple baseball games in between keynote speeches. So maybe you need to schedule it around some of those Nats games or Baltimore Ravens games. So
Yeah. So the Angels I actually teach a class this afternoon at UCLA, and it conflicts with the Angel game. So I don't know. I mean, I might be checking my phone as I'm talking. I really don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to have to figure it out. It's going to be a game time decision. Commitment.
yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and stop that recording. And